All right, Steve, we're going to stay with you because Tony Alford, of course, running backs coach, moves from Ohio State to Michigan. Okay. He's been at Ohio State since 2015. Uh, I don't know, based on, I watched a lot of, or listened to a lot of stuff from you guys and elsewhere, and picked up a lot of insight that I wasn't aware of. But so the move is not necessarily surprising in regards to him moving on, but to Michigan, certainly this has really poked the fan base.
Yeah, it's one of the most amazing developments that I can remember in my time at Ohio State covering the Buckeyes is that that you would lose a coach once spring practice has begun. Usually, you figure you're locked in for the season at that point. I'm having trouble here. Sorry. About the only thing I can remember is back in like 04, 05, Bill Conley like retired in the middle of spring football. And then he obviously came out of retirement, coached at Ohio Dominican for a few years. But like his retirement paperwork came in at that point and he walked away, from coaching in the middle of spring practice. But that was about the only other thing I can remember similar to this. And Ohio State, we send Freedom of Information Act requests to them for all the coaching contracts. And so the last one I had on Tony Alford said that it expired on January the 31st. I don't know if he was ever given another contract. He was only making, and I say only, like $630,000 plus whatever bonuses that they earned for, winning the Big Ten or going to a big bowl game or the playoff or whatever. And so I think that he probably was not offered a raise in whatever the new contract was going to be, and maybe never signed a new contract after January 31st and was just working under the terms of the old one until they could get one in place. I would have thought that I just wonder, again, I'm just kind of speaking off the cuff here without, and these guys may have better insight when they get going as to, through their contacts, exactly what the disconnect was. But it seems like Ryan Day and Chip Kelly feel like they could do better at the running back position, feel like they could get more out of the players at that position and more out of the coach at that position. And so I don't think they're broken up at all that Tony Alford's leaving. The fact that he's leaving to go to Michigan, well, you go where the money is. And if they're going to pay him what he thinks he's worth, then, he's got to do that. Loyalty's a two-way street. And, if he didn't feel like they were doing right by him, he looks around and sees everybody else in the room's making $1 million and he's scraping by on 600, and he's a veteran coach. He's got a lot of years in. He probably figures he deserves it. So that's my 2 cents on it. Just really weird that it's Michigan, but if somebody's not locked up in a contract, they can walk away at any moment. And so I presume that Chip Kelly has somebody in mind, maybe from his past, that maybe somebody from UCLA or another stop along the way, and they're going to get somebody in there probably as soon as they can. It'll probably be the grad assistants coaching the running backs for a week or two and until they get somebody in there. But I'm eager to hear what Tony and Kevin have unearthed on this, because this hit me as I was flying to Minnesota yesterday. And I was like, what? He's going where to do what? But, we had a note maybe in our boarding house rumors column a week ago that they nosed around on Eddie George. And I was like, what? So I don't know that Eddie George is going to be the guy, but maybe that just is an indication that they thought they could do better. So that's where they're at.
Well, and we had heard that Day was thinking about the decision to bring Tony Alford back after the season was not a foregone conclusion. And we got a bunch of release on some contracts in February where some of the guys that were extended and Tony Alford wasn't one of those. So I don't know if he was just operating right now under a 1-year deal. And I think last year, because I was looking yesterday, last year he made about $770 some thousand. And obviously he's going to get more from Michigan, but also more years. So I think it's a 3-year thing versus maybe a 1-year deal at Ohio State. And, you know, he was going into his 10th year at Ohio State, same running back position. So at some point, if you want to move up, you have to go do it somewhere else, perhaps. And, you know, as Steve said, loyalty is a 2-way street, but I think he's been pretty loyal. They've been loyal to him. I mean, he's carved out a pretty good career at Ohio State, but it's just been the same thing. And so this might be an opportunity not just to reset the clock, which it will do, but also give him maybe just freshen him up a little bit as well. Because, like I said, going into your 10th year at the same place, that's rare for an assistant coach. And Ohio State had a couple of those with Larry Johnson as well. But I don't know that I expected him to be back next year based on what we were hearing about this past season.
Yeah, I kind of heard the same things too. I mean, Ohio State made its coaching staff changes, and you look at the contracts and you look at who was released, who was put in that release with 2- and 3-year extensions, and Tony Alford wasn't. According to the USA Today assistant coaching database, I think Tony was making just shy of 800. So you wonder if Ward Manuel, in order to try and gain a little bit of the PR battle, overpaid potentially. And that's, I don't say that as a slight to Tony. I just say to Tony Alford, that is. I'm always here to slight Tony Gerdeman. But you wonder if he overpaid to try and recapture the narrative a little bit. I mean, obviously, Ohio State is sitting with quite possibly the best running back room in the nation this year with Trevion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins and Dallin Hayden. And you go and you get the coach, and Ohio State was sitting in really good position with a lot of top national backs for the class of 2025. And I'm sure, I'm not even looking at the chat right now, but I'm willing to bet if Mika Hanna is in the chat, she's asking, what does this mean for recruiting? Yeah, it came as a little bit of a shock, but not a complete shock once it happened that he was leaving. But Michigan certainly was a little bit of a surprise, and Michigan fans are high-fiving each other, and Ohio State fans are like, "Oh, he wasn't all that good anyway." And we'll see where things take us.
Before we move on to some candidates, and Kevin will stay with you, I want to hit you guys with a few points that you probably hit on elsewhere. However, these are original thoughts, nothing genius out of my head. But number one, he goes directly to the arch rival. He knows the offense. He knows a lot about recruiting, all those things that are in-house. Do you think in any way that that's of course, every coach has that opportunity once they move on to another program, especially in conference. But do you think there's possible impact there?
Does this mean that Ohio State once and for all will have to change its signals? I know we're saying that we're going to be getting helmet communications, but that doesn't mean that you throw away your signal sheets. It doesn't mean that there are not last-second signals that are shot in one way or the other. So maybe I'm really stretching to find a silver lining here or whatever, but does this finally force you to change your signals? This would be a good time with Chip Kelly coming in to run the offense and do a complete rebuild. I mean, you have, what likely is going to be a new quarterback if Will Howard takes the reins there at the quarterback position, and how you're going to operate things. Of course, there's going to be the conspiracy theory that Tony Alford made sure to hang on through the start of spring practice so he could be in all of that planning and then walk it over to his new boss. I guess. I mean, certainly Tony Alford now is going to have to be loyal to the place it is that is signing his current paycheck. So there's going to be something to that. But guess what? Coaching changes happen all the time in the industry, in sports, whatever. You have to have a plan. And if you don't have a plan, well, the next coaching change we're going to be talking about is your own, because obviously there's a breakdown at that point.
I will say that Tony Alford did say on Twitter that that is a false rumor, that he is taking all of the Ohio stuff that he has learned and the Chip Kelly stuff that he has learned and taking that over to Michigan. So just rest assured, everything that he got from Ohio State will stay at the border. It will not move into the state of Michigan. But, we've seen this before. Al Washington, Greg Madison have done it. There have been coaches that have gone back and forth, but it just feels like right now, with the state of affairs between Ohio State and Michigan, to go to Michigan at this point, I don't know. Does it feel a little personal, like to do this with Michigan? Because Tony Alford could go coach a lot of different places, but to do it at Michigan is, on one hand, it seems purposeful. On another hand, it seems like, well, this is just a really good opportunity to cash in for security, for, like I said, restarting the clock. But you can convince me, you can convince a lot of people that there is a little bit of just, a desire to want to maybe stick it to Ryan Day or something in this.
Yeah, I could see both boxes being filled, because one thing, my automatic thought when something like this happens is that the fan base is obviously emotionally attached. These guys, unless it's a legacy situation, their alma mater, it's their career. They're taking a job. They're not tied to these rivalries. Sure, he's been entrenched in this rivalry for 9 years, but this is, so there's that aspect of it as well that may or may not come into play for certain guys. There's also a thought that Travion Henderson and he are close, and this could possibly move Travion Henderson in a certain direction to move on himself.
Where the hell is that thought coming from?
I don't know. I saw it a bunch of different places. I don't know if there's any substance to it.
Come on, man.
Okay. I'm just throwing it out there because I saw it more than once or twice.
Yeah, I know from our staff, everything that we've kind of gleaned, none of the guys are planning to transfer. So regardless of this move, and they're confident in what Ohio State has and who they will get to coach them. And I just read a note that if need be, Chip Kelly will coach both the quarterbacks and the running backs for the time being, if need be, to get them through this brief moment. Sounds like that Coach Day will be interviewing some people starting next week and working really hard to try and find somebody to fill that job. And when it happens, it'll happen.
I mean, there's been a lot of wild speculation, and really, I want to use a different S word in talking about some of the things that are out there. And no offense to Mark, of course. I've read the same speculation myself on the socials, and I then look at who's saying it, and then I'm like, I wouldn't pee on them if they were on fire. So, it's, yeah. Oh, this is going to lead to, a major shift in the room. First of all, the transfer portal does not open because of an assistant coach leaving. The portal will open again at the end of spring for whatever that short portal period is. But if I have 1 year left, I'm not going somewhere to start over or anything like that. I mean, it just, once again, is just people out there trying to get reactions, people out there engagement farming. I've been known to after a couple of drinks of me to say some things on Twitter just to see if I can get some engagement going on. But all of my BS is based in reality. This other BS is not.
Posted a poll on Twitter, one as well here on the YouTube page just before we came on. So I'm not going to get into those because the numbers are still accumulating. So we'll update those at some point and let everyone know where the Twitter poll stands in regards to your caring about this move from the highest intensity of vitriol to you just don't care. And probably one I should have included that somebody mentioned in the chat is I should have put some kind of just adds to the drama. I added juice on one of those selections. But yeah, drama is a good word as well. So next up, as Steve has brought up, more importantly, moving on, and who could possibly be filling this role? Where are the candidates? Who wants to step on this one?
Well, if I'm up, I can say that some of the names that I've seen bandied about, obviously Eddie George, I touched on him a little bit ago. I believe he's still the head coach at Tennessee State, and whether he'd want to walk away from that to come back to Ohio State and Columbus, I don't know. He's probably carved out a pretty nice life for himself wherever Tennessee State is, and that may be, his home turf right now. But so, that's an obvious one. To have a guy that won the Heisman Trophy on your staff would be pretty cool. Scotty Graham is an interesting name. Scotty Graham and I both lived in Baker Hall in the late 1980s on the same floor. And he was a running back. He played in the same backfield with Carlos Snow. So sometimes he'd play fullback and sometimes he was the feature back. So I look at it that he's kind of gone through an interesting career path. He was an administrator at Arizona State for a while and then was convinced to come out of that and go coach at Arizona for a little while as the running backs coach there, and is now, I believe, at Washington. So, maybe he would want to come back to his alma mater, kind of like Tim Walton, been gone for 30 years. And come back, so many years later. I think they would have played together at least one or 2 years, perhaps, in their time at Ohio State. So that's an interesting name as well. Pepe Pearson works for Eddie George at Tennessee State as the running backs coach. Maybe he's a guy. And then Dave Biddle from our staff said there is one more name who is actually not a former Ohio State running back that he could not reveal, prime candidate for this job at this point, that is also going to get an interview next week. So I guess we'll stay tuned on that. But yeah, those were some of the early names that really popped up. And of course, Eddie would give you that cachet, but kids, in 2024, do they, know Eddie George won the Heisman Trophy 30 years ago? That's a good question.
Well, and yeah, there's going to be no shortage of applications for Ryan Day to go through. I believe yesterday Tim May reached out to Eddie George, and Eddie said no, that he would not be not interested. We'll see. I reached out to somebody who has worked with Scotty Graham in the past, to just get their assessment, and said he wouldn't. Could see him taking it if it was offered, but also that he's a very high energy guy and an incredible recruiter. So that's kind of right up the Ohio State alley. But a lot of times it's, what kind of connections do you have to Ryan Day, to Chip Kelly? And we've seen the hires that Ryan Day has made. It's generally been guys that he knows or his coordinator knows. And I don't know that Scotty Graham really has any connection because, like Steve said, he's been at Arizona State for a while. So while we always just immediately go to former Buckeyes who are in coaching, that's I think you got to look at the tree more than any than maybe the degree there, Kevin.
Yeah, everybody wants to sit there and say that, the staff has to be full of alumni, and that's not always necessarily going to be the case. There's going to be something said about familiarity with Ryan, familiarity with Chip. When Ohio State went and brought in a new offensive coordinator, part of the marching orders were hiring and firing powers to kind of shape the staff that they want. If that is true, then obviously Chip Kelly is going to have a major impact on what this is going to be. So of course people have gone through and tried to look at the Chip Kelly coaching tree. Deuce Staley is somebody who was there in Philadelphia. Tom Rathman was in San Francisco. He has been retired for a couple of years. we always like to go into these coaching searches and say, oh, we got a great idea of who the list is. And many times we're proven right. And a lot of times somebody completely out of left field. So if you sit there and say that I have to take Eddie, Pepe, and Scotty Graham or the field, I'm probably still taking the field at this point, just based on the fact of Chip Kelly really is kind of the wild card in there that creates some uncertainty of the direction that they're going to want to go. It's all well and good, and it just comes down to the individual, honestly, because just because you went to a school and you get it, you understand what this rivalry is, you understand what it means, that's fine. But that doesn't mean that you're going to go out there and be a great recruiter. That doesn't mean that you're going to be able to go out there and develop players. It doesn't mean that you're going to see eye to eye with your fellow coaches in the coaching room. So you have to find somebody that fits. And something I'm going to say too about the running back coaching job is that job is 95% recruiting and 5% development, because it's just how it is. You have one or two positions on your staff of where you stash your best recruiters, and running back coach is primarily one of those spots. So I think so much of what it is that this coach needs to do is going to be selling ketchup popsicles to a woman in white gloves. I mean, you're going to have to be able to go into schools and land these kids. Yes, there is a level of development and everything else, but when you have Ryan Day and Chip Kelly and everything else, Justin Fry, even to a certain extent, I'm not looking as much about what their running back chops are. Now, you can't bring in somebody who doesn't know what the hell they're doing. I mean, it's valuable, limited real estate when you only have 10 counting coaches, and you don't want to lock up with somebody who has no idea. But so much of this is about going and being a top recruiter.
In that vein, the recruiting aspect of it, I tweeted this out, put it on our board. Tony Alford has recruited one NFL draft pick at running back out of high school, and that's J.K. Dobbins. Now that might grow by one this year with Mayan Williams, might grow by another next year with Travion Henderson. But there's like a 6-year window of 2016, which would have been his first class, to 2020, which would be draft eligible last year. That's 5 classes with one NFL draft pick. And at Ohio State, like that used to be the quarterback. That's not even quarterback. I think they would have more draft picks than that at quarterback over the years. And Ohio State has never been a great quarterback producer, but they put some 5th rounders, some 6th rounders in the NFL. To only have one draft pick in that span of time, to go into a season with, no offense, but Master Teague as your starting running back. I mean, these are not great situations that the running backs at Ohio State have found themselves in. The position has found itself in. So I think there's obviously an opportunity for improvement here. There would have been improvement. There's been improvement anyway with Tony Alford. But overall, you look at the span of time, like, how do you explain one NFL draft pick in a 6-year stretch or 5-year stretch of recruiting classes when you're bringing in 1.5 guys a year? So I know those 5 years, you probably brought in 8 guys, and so 12.5% of your running back recruits in the span of time gets drafted in the NFL. I don't think that's good enough.
I agree. I think Henderson is obviously a big coup for him that he got Henderson, but there just hasn't been. I mean, they're in on a lot of great running backs and don't seem to land very many of them. So, I mean, they get guys that are ranked around 100 nationally as opposed to, top 20 at running back. But, whatever. I just think that Ryan Day wants more out of that position, and only he knows what Tony Alford does behind the scenes, whatever his contributions are. Ryan Day's the only one who really knows that. And again, I go back, years and years ago. We had a friend of ours who covered recruiting, and there would be a guy who would verbal somewhere else, would maybe have an OSU offer, but would verbal somewhere else, and people would go on the message boards and say, "Oh, so and so has dropped the ball again on this, or dropped the ball again on that." And my friend reminded me that the coach at the time was Jim Tressel. They said they don't drop the ball on anybody. It's the ball is on the ground because they wanted it on the ground. Basically, in those instances, that was kind of a lesson for me, that don't get caught up in the fact that they lost a recruit because that they're in on somebody else, so they've got a plan. So I'm going to operate under the suspicion that Day and Kelly have a plan, and they're not broken up at all about this. If they really, I mean, and they, from what our people said, that they did make a counter offer to Tony Alford, but maybe not for the same number of years that Michigan offered, and so he went in that direction. And I thought it was comical. He posted the "Thank you, Buckeye Nation" or something, and to a man and a woman, Buckeye Nation completely no-sold that. it was no thank you, no sir, get the F out. I mean, it was like,
I believe the name that I saw thrown around a lot yesterday was Benedict Alford, if you will. Benedict Alford. But
yeah.
let me play devil's advocate a little bit on the running back development. I think James Peoples, incoming freshman this year, is going to prove to be a pretty solid back, but we are looking at a very different Ohio State offense over the 9 years of Tony Alford than the previous 9 million years of Ohio State history when it comes to how the offense is generated and everything else. And I don't know if you're necessarily going to have a lot of J.K. Dobbins type of performances when you look at some of the quarterbacks that they've had, certainly some of the receivers that they've had. Now, a very valid point could be made that Ohio State has gone a little too pass happy, maybe a lot too pass happy, hasn't been able to pick up the tough yardage, has not necessarily been able to get what it wants to done in the run game. Is that a result of scheme? Is that a result of personnel? That's up for debate at that point. But yeah, there certainly have been some years where the running back recruiting hasn't necessarily been able to bear the fruit that everybody expected. And I think one of the most recent phenomena is Ohio State in the last 2 cycles has lost running backs via NIL deals to Miami, Florida at the 11th hour. And there was a joke going on about Byron Lewis and is Ohio State going to continue recruiting him, just knowing what's going on there. It'll be an interesting case study to see whatever Tony's replacement does on that, because there's no doubt in my mind Byron Lewis is very interested in Ohio State. But when Miami starts swinging big bags of life wallet cash around, it can be difficult to say no as well.
But Kevin, you're talking about the pass happy offense. That is 2018, and as J.K. Dobbins is the running back, he gets drafted. The pass happy offense with C.J. Stroud, that's Travion Henderson. He's going to get drafted. So it is different offenses, but the names and the production and the getting drafted is just the odd part of this. I'll just give you the 8 names from 2016 to 2020, the running backs that were signed: Demario McCall, Antonio Williams. McCall ends up as a corner. Antonio Williams ends up at UNC. He does play in the NFL. I don't know that he got drafted. J.K. Dobbins in 2017. 2018, you signed Brian Snead and Master Teague. Snead gets kicked out of school, I believe, and Teague ends up just being done.
Just being a great dude.
Yes. And then 2019, Steel Chambers, Marcus Crowley. Chambers moves to linebacker. Crowley has bad knees and couldn't, both of those guys averaged like 9 yards a carry as freshmen, but didn't work out. And then in 2020, Mayan Williams. And he will, I don't know, he's going to be a 3rd-day pick, I'm guessing, because I don't expect his 40 to be all that great. But obviously, he's a talented back. Could never unseat Travion Henderson. but that's not a great list of like I said, there's injuries and things like that, and there have been times where the room has been low. I do think things were on the upswing, and we've talked for over the past since like June about Ohio State being in on like 8 different high 4-star 2025 running backs, and Tony Alford having to pick, of 2 or 3 guys, whatever he wants. And so things obviously we're not trending down, but clearly Ryan Day wanted more, and this is very much a put up or shut up year, I think, for Tony Alford. And I think he made the decision that a lot of people would make if you take the emotional aspect out of it, which I know that's hard to do with Ohio State, Michigan. But if you're looking at, well, I've got 1 year and I don't know what's happening after that versus I've got 3 years, more money. I don't care what happens after that right now. I mean, that's a pretty easy decision.
Well, let's also remember before Ryan Day really took the reins, the running back was the quarterback under Urban Meyer. So you have that, and Marcus Crowley was a Mr. Football in Florida. He was a big deal. Brian Snead was a big deal when that happened. I mean, yes, there had been some odd decisions of directions that they went at various times. I'll be the first one to admit it. And I think I said it at the time. It's like, it's probably not the back I would have pursued or whatever, but it is what it is. But in the moment, some of those backs were, high 4 stars, low 5-star type of backs. And it just, again, goes to show the uncertain nature of recruiting. And even if you have the best system in place, if somebody's ACL doesn't want to hang on, or somebody, their body is, their mind is willing and their body is unwilling, I'm going to tell you which one's going to win.